Well, welcome everybody. This is our fourth workshop covering board development for the Illinois Access to Justice Coalition. I'm Tom Tresser. I'm the COO, co-founder of the Civic Lab, and one of your trainers today. So as we did for the last sessions, this is being recorded, and the link will be placed into the Smartsheet resource page. The Civic Lab is a Black-led 501c3 do tank for social justice and capacity expansion. We're all about activation, fabrication, education, liberation. And we really do believe that people need some knowledge in order to run the show and not be run by the show. So that's a little about us. And as you certainly know by now, the Access to Justice Coalition is a statewide operation really trying to lift up the practices in the immigration and incarceration spaces for the frontline folk that are on this call. So that's what we're about. Next slide. And our offerings include other one-on-one trainings, such as TIF 101, Community Organizing 101, and how to run for office, and a lot more. And we'll be together for another couple of months, and hopefully you'll get a chance to see some of these other things that we do, and hopefully it'll be useful for you. But we've trained about 3,000 people since we started the training work in 2017. Next slide. The budget's in the news these days as the city council is debating the budget. And there's a lot of discussion about public money. And the Civic Lab says there's a lot more on the table than they'd like to admit. And it's all covered in the book, Chicago is Not Broke. We'll put that information in chat for you. And we've done about 60 meetings around the book, Chicago is Not Broke. All right, I think that's it for me. Next slide.
All right. So why we're covering this material. This is our agenda for today. We're going to go over the elements of strategic thinking, strategic planning 101. We're going to do a small group exercise on strategy in your organization. We're going to go over how do you and your organization stay informed. We'll have a short break, 30 minutes. Then we're going to go over the planning process. We're going to do a exercise on SWOT, which is a tool, an analysis tool of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which are a basic part of any strategic planning process. And then we'll finish up with some comments, questions, and we'll have you do your evaluations of the session, which are very important to us. So we're going to ask you to finish those evaluations before you log off. Next slide.
Well, I already introduced myself, Tom Tresser. I call myself a civic educator and public defender. I've been in this work for about 40 years. I started or led 15 nonprofits in the space of community organizing, community development, the arts, and civic engagement. And we're in this to win this, and but we can't win for justice unless we're all super smart and working together. And that's hopefully why we're all on the call today and why we're doing what we're doing. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, and all of you guys know me. Amma Johnson. I'm co-founder, CEO of Ubuntu Institute for Global Learning. I have been in program fund development and organizational development for probably 30 years, a little bit behind Tom there. And as I've said, my purpose and goal for why I do this work has not changed. For me, it's to, like I said, stand in the gap and help those find their voice and help those develop to the point where they can really, make an impact in their community and in the work that they do for social justice. So that's why I do what I do. Philip?
Yes, and I'm Philip Thomas. I'm a proud father of four, widowed, single father. I was born and raised in Chicago, in Inglewood on the South Side. Went to St. Ignatius for high school, and have worked at a number of government, nonprofit, and foundation organizations. I've been a board member, which is very relevant to our sessions today. I've been a board member on a number of organizations, including the Civic Lab. And I do this work because I believe that the key to social change is in the communities themselves, with the people themselves, and not with the policymakers. They're supposed to be our public servants. And so if they are servants, we have to be trained and understand how to give them their marching orders so they can be responsive to our communities. And so if I were going to sum up why I do that work, is to help our communities in this process of bettering themselves.
Okay, next slide.
See, perks of working from home, and other people don't know you're working from home. So they don't know I'm in a meeting. Making sure my sons don't make any noise. There you go.
So as we said before, your nonprofit organization is a complex organism, and there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle of making your organization strong, vital, and long-lived. And so we offer this a little constellation of content to think about the different buckets that we're going to be covering. We're now down in the green zone. Number 3, when we're talking about planning and working the plan. So that's where we are for this. You know, in our earlier sessions, we were up in zones 5 and 1. Okay, next slide. As we say, all this material is online for you at your smart sheet. So you can put that link into the chat for the smart sheet that Jane has thoughtfully prepared for you. Just to remind you, that sheet contains the master schedule, and we'll have the PowerPoint deck, the saved chat, and a link to the video that we're making today. So all that will be on every session that we do. So if you find value in these sessions and you want your colleagues to experience them, they can just simply go to that space, click on the link, and see the video and go through the training. And the same will be for this training. In a day or two, it'll be online. Okay, next slide. So what do we mean by strategic planning? That word is used a lot. You know, the word strategy deserves some discussion. So I'd like to hear from you guys. What do you think of the word strategy, strategic planning? What does that trigger for you? You can throw it into chat, put it out, put it online. What does it mean to you? What is strategic planning? What does it mean to be strategic? Anybody? A tremendous hush falls over the room. Well, hearing no thoughts, the image that I posted for you is sort of kind of the suggestive. It's seeing into the future. Roadmap. There you go. Yeah. So you're thinking about where you are today, and then you're forecasting into the future where you want to be. And it's intentional. It's not like where we might be, or, you know, it's not like you're a raft and the water will take you anywhere it wants to. You're thinking, no, intentionally, where should we be? So there's a couple of things in there. There's a should in there, which requires actually a lot of thinking. When you're thinking about a social justice organization responding to the needs out there. You're trying to think into the future and saying, well, if nothing changes and we have things sort of as they are, what should we do? But if things change and things could change, right? Are we prepared to move left, right, or continue up the middle? So bottom line is, I would say it's seeing a desirable future and moving intentionally to that future. Now, how you do that is kind of what we're going to be talking about today. But the bottom line is, collectively, your organization has a vision for the future, and the plan is your roadmap to that future. And obviously, it includes other thoughts like, well, what kind of car do we need? How long are we going to be on the road? Do we have stops for fuel, biology? You know, how are we going to get this car on that map to the future? Now, it could be that people on this call have done strategic plans before, and it could be that you know of a strategic plan, and we're going to get to that in a minute. So, just for yucks, put into the chat right now if you've ever been part of a strategic planning process, just to get a sense of where we're at. Yeah, Susan, that makes sense. And we'll revisit these responses in a few minutes. So right now, just put in the chat if you've been part of a strategic planning process. Next slide. So this guy, Professor Jim Schrager, is probably one of the world's best authorities on strategic planning. He's over at the University of Chicago. He typically advises large companies, nations, important political figures, labor unions, and stuff like that. And of course, he teaches strategic planning. And so he has a few points. He says, for one thing, strategic planning is about separating facts from judgment, which leads to a second point about where do you get your facts from. Then he asks, investigate the question why you're great. He asks that we know the competition, and he asks that we take note of the powerful bad patterns based on observable data. So let's take these one at a time. Separating facts from judgment.
Sorry.
Yeah, cool. So separating facts from judgment, a lot of people will just shoot from the hip and say, well, I think the following about my organization, that we should do this, we should do that. Or I think our organization is awesome. And you have a lot of emotion around your thinking about your organization. But when we enter the planning process, we need facts in order to make good decisions. And sometimes this can be a problematical situation. And so you need a little bit of rule setting when your group is entering this process. It's like, how shall we handle controversy? So Amma says this and Tom says this, but it's based on what? Is Amma ready to defend her position in this planning space? And is Tom ready to argue respectfully, like, well, no, Amma, I don't think you have the full picture. Here's my set of facts, and let the group somehow come to some consensus, so that it's not just me being a good arguer, like using my debate tricks or being loud or something or preemptive. In the planning space, we come prepared with our various assignments, and we surrender our emotion about what should be to looking pretty resolutely at what is. And we'll talk about information sources in a few minutes. The second point asks a different version of the same question. If you think your organization is so awesome, why? And again, defend it with facts. And don't mistake coincidence for causation, which is a common error. So here's the example that Professor Schrager actually used back when he taught, and I learned this from him. He said, why is Walmart great? And again, you may not like Walmart for its labor practices, but if I were to ask you right now in chat, why is Walmart great? What would people respond? Why are they dominant? Low prices, right? That is, and of course, that's part of their marketing. They're everywhere. That's actually more to the point, Phil. So what Schrager actually did with his team, this is now some years ago, they went into Walmarts around the country and they took like a laundry, like a shopping bag, basket of things like milk, Pampers, whatever, woman's shirt, things like that, like 10 or 15 things on their shopping list, things that are pretty common. And they priced them out. And then they went to different places in the same areas. And guess what they found? That on average, the Walmart prices are actually higher. So what? So what they do is there's certain products that they call loss leaders, that like toilet paper for a nickel a roll or something. So some things that people just obviously need a lot of, and for large households, they might buy several boxes of this stuff. So hey, that's a pretty good deal. We'll get like 50 things of toilet paper for like $5 or whatever it is. Oh, as long as we're in there, let's do restock on the milk, and let us do also, I think Amma needs a new sweater. And let's take care of our needs that way. And guess what? That's where Walmart makes its profit. Now, they located in places that didn't have easy access to these goods. That gave them their leg up. But what made them so profitable was that they were able to sell, once people got into the stores, items that they could have bought elsewhere. The next thing that they did was their distribution system. So their logistics, which again, if you think about it, makes sense. If they've got 500 stores, think of the massive distribution center they have. Everybody's talking about Amazon today as a master distribution, but they actually wrote the book in just-in-time delivery of goods. So their system, which is data also. So they were pioneers in knowing, like, the store in Raleigh, North Carolina is different from the store in Rochester, New York, and the following items sell good in these stores. And so just before the last item is out, a new shipment shows up just in time. So they save money on gas. There's no overstock, there's no waste. And they're just like bears about that. So getting the goods to where they need to be at the right time sounds sort of like commonplace. What's the big deal about that? But it's huge. And it's a big part of their sort of under the radar operations. Anyway, I belabor the point because we could easily be misled if we just accepted the assertion that Walmart is great because of low prices. And if I was a competitor to them, thinking that that's what made them great, I could be completely misled and wrong-headed about my response to make my organization compete with Walmart. So the lesson here is, if your organization is doing very well, in your opinion, just be prepared to defend that with metrics, and then know, to the third point, what your competition is doing. So it could be that an organization's claim to fame is simply because it's the only one in the neighborhood, kind of like Walmart, right? So it's not necessarily your organization is awesome, it's just you're the only one doing this work. And people must come to you for the service you're offering. So, so you kind of surrender your assumptions. I think that's a great way to put it when you're in the planning process. Okay. Third, the last point is the powerful patterns based on observable data. Because you guys are collecting data all the time, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, what do you do with all this data? Is it just spreadsheets and reports that sit on your boss's desk or something, or they go into some kind of fancy brochure to give out at the end of the year? No, the use of data to guide your work is critical. And it depends on what it is that you're collecting will allow you to be a good steward of your organization. So it means that you've got to ask some pretty basic questions like, what are we measuring around here? What are we counting? What's important? There's a saying, you measure what matters. And so that's a statement of values from your organization's leadership. What's important to your organization will guide you on what you measure, not just in your own organization, but out in the world as well, in your community. Okay. And when you put this data together, this important, impactful data together in a way that you can watch it and look at it, now you look for patterns. You have to sit back and go, well, it looks like the following is happening. It looks like because the factory closed in our area, it looks like we're going to get more cases because they're going to be more hard luck. There's going to be more. So if you're a food pantry, you're gonna predict the impact of that event on your organization because you're collecting the data. You're not sitting there in oblivion, where all of a sudden 50 people show up at your door. You had no idea. Oh, it's because they closed the factory 2 weeks ago. Oops, we didn't track that. So there's a little bit of creativity here, right? So you've got to be a creative steward of your data, and then you have to be able to look at it periodically and go, what do we see? Multiple eyes on the data to help you interpret. Okay, so that's according to Mr. Schrager, Professor Schrager's points about strategy and strategic planning. Next slide. So to be a good planner, you got to be a good strategic thinker. So we're going to say here, what's the elements of a good strategic thinker or a strategist, a strategic thinker person? Well, first, it's not just about crunching numbers. You need the numbers, as I suggested. You absolutely need to have your facts and your trends and your data, but it's just not as simple as filling out this spreadsheet. You've got to have some critical thinking. You have to have the context, right? You have to have a bit of the background for your organization and for your community, so that you're bringing your whole self to that process, and it's informed by data. The next point is, can you predict outcomes and imagine consequences? So this again is again based on your lived experience to say, well, things are cyclical. We've had situations where factories have opened and closed. This organization has been around 20 years. So remember, 15 years ago, that factory closed. We know what happened in the wake of that. So that's the history of the organization. That's the history that you're bringing. So that's informing you to say, well, I'm guessing that if another factory closes, it's probably going to be like it was 5-7 years ago. It's that kind of bringing your imagination and your lived experience and your knowledge of what's going on in the community, and then another few points, a few percentage points of pure imagination to just ask open-ended questions. So you could ask yourself, what if? That's a great question to ask. What if you got this funding? What if you lost this funding? What if COVID was completely tamped down? What if COVID breaks out and there's a new thing like an epsilon, something that we didn't predict? So if you're in the healthcare space, you would certainly be in that mindset. But I guess, again, with the presidential, policies changing, well, what if President Biden loses his reelection or he chooses not to run in 2024? You can run those scenarios. So again, asking yourself, what if? Next one. Yeah, your intuition is guided by your constant learning. So again, your intuition and your imaginative thinking is augmented by the solid facts that you command. Now, it's part of the planning process to have several people around the planning table with the same facts and go, you know what, I see it going this way. And someone else says, well, I don't think it's going to go that way. I think it's going to go another way. And then it's again open for debate and testing. So again, part of the planning process could be, if Tom has one theory of the future of the organization and Amma has another, how can we test it, in real time, for a short outcome? So again, this is what happens inside the planning process. You're thinking about the future of your organization. And then the next point is you're open to insights and inputs. So again, sometimes you bring in outside help to help you with your planning process, and they are bringing, other knowledge and insights from their work and their experiences. And sometimes the outsider can see things that maybe the insiders couldn't see. So that again is part of your information. When I'm engaged in the planning process, I actually like to go and hang out at the space of the group that I'm working with and just like be a fly on the wall, almost like an anthropologist, and just sit and just observe what happens. The flow into the room, the flow of the building, the flow of people. And I like to interview people almost like a naive person, like, I don't know anything. Tell me what you do and how you do it and how you run your day here. And you put those kind of observations together and you can feed them back to the organization. And sometimes that gives them a perspective that they just simply don't have as being sort of immersed. The fish sometimes can't see, the water. So having an open mind and being willing to go, well, I don't really know why we do that. We have always done it that way, whatever it is. And being open to saying, well, actually, the reason for doing that thing that you observed, Tom, is actually lost in time. When I came to the organization, my predecessor told me to do it that way, and that's the way I've been doing it, whatever that is. You see what I'm saying? So having that openness is very helpful. And the last point is something we were touched on, willing to question your basic assumptions. I think that's all I have for this point up to now.
So the basics of strategic planning. Tom has just spoke about the necessity, why we do it. And this part is to talk about what goes into strategic planning. What are the different components of it? So what your organization intends to accomplish and how you will direct the organization and its resources towards accomplishing your goals. That is your strategic plan. It's your process. It's your work plan over time. Okay. And I can't say enough, it's a living document. It's something that you really should be looking at. And we'll talk about that more as we go along. So I know all of you have pretty much said different things. Either they've worked on a strategic plan or you're familiar with strategic plans. I'm curious at this point, I'd like for you to tell us, does your organization currently have a strategic plan? I'm going to put my fingers like this. I hope you do. So could you put into the chat real quick, yes or no, or you don't know? And if your organization does have a strategic plan, how long ago was it done? And were you involved? And if you were involved, how were you involved? Okay, so if you guys could put that in the chat right now, this is something I want us to talk about right now. I've been involved in several strategic plans, whether I was a staff member giving input or on the other side, helping to facilitate the strategic plan, and also as a board liaison in the strategic planning process for the organization. So I've had my share of strategic planning processes, thinking about strategic plans. And I can't say enough, you do really need to be thinking about the direction that your your organization's going. So it says, oh, we completed one a few weeks ago and we do them annually. Everybody's saying yes, yes, yes. Do you mind, Laura, if we can speak with you a little bit about the process that your organization took for the strategic plan, and also were you involved?
Yeah, I was involved. Our organization has like lots of partnerships, and sometimes our partners need to coordinate with each other and through us. So we do them every year, and we invite all of our partner organizations to it, and they attend. And yeah, we talk about the overall mission of our organization, but then like I do work ahead of time to, it's kind of like an agenda, but I develop like categories that we have to talk about at the strategic planning. So one of them is like fundraising, or, you know, the financial aspect of it. Another one is like team engagement and I could.
No, it's okay. We're actually going to go through those. But, so what is your role, Laura?
I'm the director.
Okay, CEO or
executive director?
Executive director. Okay, thank you, ED. All right. So, and your organization is doing it annually. Have you ever done a multiple year strategic plan?
No, we do them. We just do them every year in the fall, kind of for the following year.
Got it. Got it. That's very interesting. Phil and Tom, I would love for you to, if you could add a comment to that. Have you been on any strategic plans that have been done annually? Either one of you, Tom or Philip?
I have not.
I have not either. You know, I guess maybe there's a difference in terminology or understanding a little bit, because generally the strategic plan, you think about it having a 3 to 5 year duration, because you're visioning out. And then the year-to-year review I've been involved in of how we stack up to what we were talking about in the plan. But in terms of like all of the process, I think that we're going to go through with this, it would be difficult logistically to do that every year in the kind of depth that we're going to be talking about now.
Got it. And Laura, as we keep going, I'm going to be asking you questions because it's very interesting that you all are doing it annually. And I'm just wondering also, do things change quickly for you in terms of the work that you do that you have to do it annually? Like,
right, I was just gonna say doing a 3 to 5 year one just wouldn't make a lot of sense for us, because of the constant growth, especially in the area that we work, and the constant building of our partners and the need for replanning my right word, but like recalibrating kind of what we're doing. Part of the biggest reason is we do immigration legal services, and things are changing, have been changing in the last 4 years so fast. And so our partnerships were changing, and like the way that we were doing our intakes changed because of the pandemic, and just everything was changing so fast that it didn't make sense to kind of do a 3 to 5 year plan. Maybe we could get to a place where you know the field we're working in is stable, and so we could kind of make those projections, but I just don't think we're there.
It makes sense that I understand how things are changing. How old is your organization?
We are only 3 years old, so maybe that's another reason why. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. That's why I wanted to dig a little bit deeper as to why the dynamics for your organizations looks different than some of the other organizations in the room. And that could be part of that because it is fairly new. And I'd be interested because the other organizations in the room, Susan, maybe you can jump in, Netza, maybe you can jump in terms of, Susan, you said that you did your strategic plan 5 years ago. So it looks like you might be coming up on a new strategic planning process.
Yep. We did ours 5 years ago. We were very different looking organization 5 years ago, but it was an extremely helpful document. And we did have a strategic planning committee that we would from time to time review and update the document because things would definitely change. And as you said, it's a living document, which we certainly found. But we've really at this point exceeded a lot of the goals that we had in that. So it's really time for us to do it again. Of course, the problem is that, we're doing DEI work and we're doing with the fundraising consultants. So, we've got to fit it in somehow, but, so it's time, but we're trying to figure out where to fit it in.
And, it's interesting that you say it's time and you're doing all these new things. So how does DEI, which is huge,
right
now people have to start planning for that. So that is something that you definitely need to look long and hard at when you're putting your strategic plan together, right?
Right.
The other thing, did you say funding? Was that the other thing? I'm sorry.
We're working with a fundraising consultant right now as well,
Right.
trying to amp up our fundraising.
Exactly. And we're going to see that that's a core component of a strategic plan,
Right.
And the fund development plan is embedded in the strategic plan. That's a whole nother thing. So, fun for you guys right now. And I don't mean that facetiously. I really do mean fun time to really get to think about where your organization is, where you're headed, the growth, the creativity. I think you guys are in an awesome space, to take the organization to the next level. So I love that. And I just want to give you sort of clap my hands to you guys because you've exceeded your goals. But you wouldn't have known that unless you had a strategic plan in place, right? So that's
goals are good.
Yeah. So I love that.
Yeah.
Netza, just real quick for you. I know you just joined. Have you been part of a strategic planning process or has your
actually, yes.
been part of one? Mm-hmm.
Yes, well, it's a long process, I know I didn't just join. I've been here from the beginning.
Good. I just saw your face. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Thank you, my dear. Anyway, it's good to see all of you, and Susan and Laura. Good to see you. It's always a challenging and always a non-ending story, especially in a small organization. Because we have to reinvent ourselves over and over every other, I would say 3 years. We started as a nonprofit providing services to people from Mexico City, for example. And then we saw the need and opportunity to serve the immigrant community in the legal aspect of it. But then we strategized to see, okay, first of all, we need to understand as an organization, it is exactly as a corporation, who we are, what do we do, who do we serve? And based on that, then we needed to strategize because our goal is to be self-sufficient.
Right.
It is very difficult in these days to struggle because every day you see one new nonprofit, flourishing and all of them fighting for the same funds, And then as Tom was saying last time, what have you thought? And then as you're telling us right now, okay, a strategist think, what if, like Tom says, so we always think of what if, and we don't want to be dependent on one source of income. Like last time you said, strategize as don't put your eggs in one basket, all of your eggs in one basket. You need to diversify. So our strategy has to always diversify. However, the difficult and the challenge is to maintain a strength in the field of the competition, as you are saying, because everything is competition. And unfortunately, when you come into the world of nonprofit, it becomes political. And
It's
I hate
very
that.
political.
And I hate
And
that,
To your point, those are the things, like, because in this field, things are very political, things are changing quickly.
Right.
It almost begs that I want to talk more with Laura and Susan as to how how do you marry that to get to a cadence where you are strategizing, where you're not behind, you know? You're because one person's saying every year and somebody's saying 5 years. So it's sort of like how do you get that happy medium? And also, how many years is your strategic plan for your organization?
It is a lot. We always say long-term, midterm, and our short-term is 6 months.
6 months short-term.
Yeah.
What's your long-term?
My long-term is always 3 years. I mean, because
okay.
like Laura was saying, we cannot speculate more than 3 years. I mean, yes, in 5 years, I mean, 10 years, we want to retire out of the organization. No, but you know, it's not that. I mean, is it true? I mean, with all these elements, it's not going to be realistic because of all the changing environment, and especially we're in this field now. You know, we're just like you said, Emma, we're in the very political environment. And for example, in our field, you have to strategize in short term, not only because of the competition, but also because of the environment. For example, we are immigration and legal. So right now you have to understand that the immigration environment and politics is changing by the day, you know, with this rhetoric and the politics, and, you know, if it is a federal policy, or if it is a state policy, if it is a local policy, but you have to always be able to meet the needs of not only your clients, and the competition, but also the internal, you know.
Your staff, everybody.
Your staff. And
so,
you know, everybody now is trying to play with the immigration agenda, but it becomes a rhetoric. So our strategy is
what we're going to do later on in the training. We're going to do a SWOT analysis, and I want you to hold on to that, because I want you to look at some of those issues that you're raising now when we do the SWOT analysis, to sort of start looking at how do we strategize for the short term. Like, how do you create these strategic plans for an area that changes so quickly?
But Laura was mentioning, you know, I mean, last year we were strategizing in January. We were strategizing, we were doing great. March, boom,
everything is different.
Everything's right. And then as Laura said, well, okay, so what do we do? We strategize, like you say right now, very short term. That's what our strategy is right now, short term.
Yeah. And that's very interesting. You guys have really raised a point for me, because I never really thought about the fact that things change very quickly in that area. And that might impact,
you know, based on the fact of the need of communicating with your clientele. You know, for example, for us, I don't know, Susan and Laura, their experiences, but for example, for us, our clientele is basically, you know, blue collar workers. I think for them too. And most of our clients are Latinos, 70%, 80% Mexicans, education rate very low. You know, they don't have emails. They're used to have a face-to-face conversation, and we had to educate them last year how to do virtual, how to do Facebook. They had a Facebook, then you do Zoom. They didn't even know what Zoom was. So then, you know, they needed to pay for fees, you know, this selling and all of that. So now it became an opportunity, because now we see even these attorneys announcing, oh, you don't have to come to our office. We can do it virtually. But it is something that we learned, that from a need, it became an opportunity. But it changes rapidly. It changes every day because of what is going on in the community. The violence is also another factor. You know, people don't want to get out of their locations, of their homes. So we need to adapt. And that's, I think, a strategy that we cannot forget, how to adapt to the rapid technology systems that go with the market. Anyway, that's the strategy. I think she got frozen, Tom.
Oh, I think you're frozen there, Amma. So what, oh, we lost her altogether.
Yeah.
What did you say?
What, what do you do, Philip?
That's not good.
Well, I think that I'm really enjoying this discussion because we are in a critically dynamic environment right now. And it's really interesting because there is no business as usual globally in terms of the way business is conducted, how people meet, how we do organizing, how we gather. All of this is dynamic. And so I don't want to think that the long-term planning that we're talking about, long to mid-term planning we're talking about, is mutually exclusive with the calibrations that are done when the environment changes. And to use the analogy that we used before with Tom's dashboard, okay, so you have your dashboard and it's telling you things in real time about where this vehicle is moving. But the strategic plan is more like the roadmap, and it's what we are using to say where our direction is and where we want to go.
So-
If things in that dashboard, the things that come up in the short term might impact how we take the rest of our journey, how fast we might go, or do we need to stop for gas, or do we need to abandon this route that we're taking? And so they're not really mutually exclusive. Obviously, every organization is different, and your understanding of time frames is going to be different.
So
But broader,
I can drive the bus until Amma gets back.
yeah.
So this is where we were. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay. So these are the things that are on the planning table. So when you're convening your team that will do this work, here's some of the stuff that you're going to be planning. The first is you're revisiting the mission and goals of your organization. That's at the top level. So are we still doing what we are supposed to do? Do we need to change in some way? Or our mission is good and valid and we just refresh it? Those are some of the questions you're asking. Who you will serve. Is your population changing? Or is it the same? Are there more or less of them? Those sorts of questions. Where and how you will serve them, which includes the physical space you operate. So some of you guys have physical buildings and physical spaces where you meet the people. Some of you have spaces that are more like private and administrative, and the folk are not sort of welcome into that space. It kind of, that's like behind the scenes, like, we don't bother the chef, at the restaurant. We stay out in the where the tables are. We don't go to see, the storeroom, and then we don't see them making the bacon and the sausage. So you may have those kinds of spaces too. And that includes your gear, your equipment, the obviously your computers and your other kind of protocols for safety, to keep records secure and all those kinds of things. So those kinds of the things you're sort of looking at with the logistics, I guess you could say, the big package. So if you're thinking that, my goodness, we're going to see a huge influx of clients in the next 12 months, can we serve them here? Do we have the space? Are we completely overrun? We don't have enough room to talk to people. We need some more examining rooms or more classrooms or whatever. And your organization's role in the community. Now, you may say, well, we're just, providing good service, but you want to look at that role and see how you're perceived by the community. And does it suggest anything? Sometimes, your leaders, people on this call, become more than just the leader of their organization. They become like a community leader. They become like a spokesperson, as it were. And that should be by design. We talked about that in earlier sessions, and we're going to revisit that in the future when we talk about programmatic development and fundraising. So your senior leaders, your board president, your chief executive, other people of that leadership level, are brand ambassadors. They're out in the community doing their work and are seen as such, which is part of your thinking. And then obviously at the end of the day, do we have enough folk to do the job? Are we paying them adequately? Is there a career path here, or are you come in and you sort of get stuck, and that's a source of friction and discontent? These are all things that you can look at when you're doing the planning process. That's all on the table.
Alma's back.
Ah,
Sorry, you guys. Somebody told me that Mercury was not in retrograde anymore, but so much for that. How rude for my computer to go into update mode.
oh
right in
my
the middle
goodness.
of the training.
Okay,
So
well, back to
I
you.
know we
Alma,
did all
then.
that, so we're on time frames, correct?
Yes.
Okay, would you like me to take over or would you
I can do this until the breakouts, I think.
keep on? Okay.
No, this content's for you, Alma. I just meant I'll drive the slides.
Okay, got it. So we've been talking about timeframes, right? We've heard annually, every 3 years, every 5 years, right? So the typical plan looks at a 3 to 5 year plan. That's typical. But given the situation, we know we're living in atypical times. So we've got some organizations that are doing things on an annual basis, okay? The plan is refreshed at least biannually, okay? So if you do have a multiple year strategic plan, you are looking at it biannually to make sure that you're still on progress, things are still aligned, and you're still on target, okay? Again, I can't say enough, it is a living document. There are so many organizations that I've spoken to in the past when I've done strategic plans where they do the strategic plan, they take all that time and energy, and trust, strategic plans take time and energy, we all know this. And then they take the strategic plan and they put it on the shelf and they don't look at it again. And then 5 or 3 to 5 years from now, they're like, we need to look at the strategic plan. We need to do another one because the timeline has passed, but they never look to see where are they? Did they meet their goals? Do they need a new strategic plan, or do they just need to work the strategic plan they never worked? That's real. I have worked in organizations where that's happened, okay? So it is real, that could happen. So I can't say enough that you should be looking at your strategic plan. It should be your guide. As program directors in the room, this is something that should be guiding your work. Your work plans are embedded. That's what we're getting to now. The operational plans that go from year to year, they're embedded in that strategic plan. So you should be looking at that. And if it's a year to year, that means at the very least, you should be looking at your operational plans quarterly at the bare minimum, but probably, as I would say, looking at it week to week, month to month, okay, to guide your overall strategic plan, okay? That it's imperative. There's no point in doing a strategic plan if you're not going to look at it and let it guide your steps.
Can I say one thing about the
Absolutely.
putting the plan on the shelf thing? I've seen that many, many times myself. It's kind of a human tendency because you're in the hunt, you're in the fight for the current thing. And so that planning process, you don't think about it until it's time to respond to something. And then what I have found is with the groups that put that on the shelf, people will regurgitate or bring out things that were already discussed in detail as if they were new ideas, simply because nobody really revisited what they thought about 3 or 5 years ago. And it's like now they have this epiphany about something and it's already something that was on their plan. It was just never implemented.
And you've wasted 3 to 5 years. So now you could be 3 to 5 years ahead in that issue, But because you look at your strategic plan, it's a blatant, I'm going to say this because I have been on the other end of that, it's a blatant waste of your time. And it will impact your programming. It will impact the overall impact of your organization if you are not
Hey,
working.
let me just ask quickly, Phil, do you still see this is being recorded in the
Yes.
cloud? It is. Okay, great.
It's recording.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so next up, we're going to take a look at the role of strategic planning in your organization. But up to this point, we've had some pretty robust conversation. I hate that I missed the last part of your conversation. I'm sure it's going to come back up in the second half.
Yeah.
But is there anything else anybody wants to add? Any questions you may have for what you've heard up until now? And then we're going to move off into small groups.
Yeah, I would like to see something that I'm not familiar very much with, but one of the strategies some time ago, like 3 years ago, I went into a seminar where they said one of the strategies for a nonprofit is to create a for-profit within the nonprofit. And they were talking about a business that you could be, but it was kind of a magical thing for me, but I could not understand. So is that something that we can in the future learn about a little bit?
Oh,
as a strategy?
absolutely. We're going to learn. So we're going to revisit resource development and fund development in another training. But
Gotcha. Because I'm sorry to interrupt, but that has been one of our strategies that we have talked about. Is like, okay, what can we do to generate funds for us that do not rely on grants?
Absolutely. So in our last training, we talked about the diversification of your income stream, your resource streams, right? We did not talk about earned income. That was the one component that we took out of the equation. So I'm going to put it back in there. And earned income is simply that. It's something that your organization is doing that you can rely on that goes back into your coffers, right? Earned income, when they say business, you could actually even think about it as membership fees, right? That's something that you've got people who are part of your organization that give money into that organization. They are getting something out of it because now they're a member, right? So those membership fees keep that organization going, keep that organization doing the services that's needed, okay? And then as a benefit, they could be getting some kind of information as a result of that area of work. There are probably activities and things that they can be involved in as a member. So you can be very, very, what can I say? Innovative, thank you. You can be very innovative about how the earned income is.
Yeah. And
what your earned income that's coming into your organization. But we'll talk about that more in our resource development.
Yeah.
I believe we do have another.
yeah,
Go ahead.
we're gonna cover program development in January 13th, and then we're gonna have a program development lab that's on January 20th. So I invite you to even bring a sketch of this thing you're talking about to that meeting, and we'll work it real time with the attendees. But then in February, we're going to be talking about grant writing, so we're going to return to that world. And then we're going to talk about budgeting, and then grassroots fundraising, and then a fundraising lab. So we're going to have lots of space to get imaginative about what we call diversifying your funding, including this idea of a for-profit subsidiary. What the heck would it do? Why would it do it? Where would it do it? All that. We'll make a special note to cover that.
Absolutely. I just wanted to put a point on it by saying what's generally a major point that's here for nonprofits trying to do this are the tax implications.
Correct.
Whether or not what they're doing is a natural outgrowth of what they already do and the revenue flows from that, or if this is something that's set aside that's not necessarily mission related, but it is for the purpose of bringing revenue in. Those are treated very differently in terms of the law. And so now that we're making notes about that, we can explicitly.
Okay.
So next slide. So Tom, this is on you. You're going to be taking us into small groups.
Okay. So at this point, we're going to just divide, I think, you guys into two groups of 3 each. And we're going to ask you to talk about a little more about what you guys have already started. How does strategic planning show up in your organization? Have you participated in an effort? If so, what did you do and what insights did you gain? So those insights can be personal insights about your own self as a professional in the work, or about the field itself. So it's a little wide open. So if Phil could go ahead and set up the 2 rooms for us, and we'll have 10 minutes in small groups. Well, thank you everybody for engaging in the small group work. So it's pretty small. So, let's just each group tell us what insights you had from your conversations. Starting with, how about the group that had Laura, Allison, and Jessica in it? What'd you all come up with?
You're muted.
Are you trying to talk, Allison?
Am I on?
Yeah, you're
There
on.
you are. Now you are.
Oh my God.
Mercury's still in retrograde.
We just talked about how immigration is changing so rapidly in the last few years that it really requires us to make quick changes, and that's what, as Netza said, that's why we we do strategic planning on a short-term basis, and we've all managed to survive and adapt to the pandemic issue and our new normal. And that's part of our strategic planning and diversifying what we're doing so that we're covered.
Mhm.
Yeah,
In
Laura's organization and ours are very similar in the way, yeah, we're small and new, not too, yeah.
And when I joined the group, they brought up a good point about organizations that were specifically working on DACA. And then when DACA went away, the organizations sort of either had to scramble or they went away. So it's almost like, how do you strategically plan for what you know is a quickly changing area? Like, it almost has to be built into your strategic plan. The fact that there may be some changes.
Or a rapid
And-
response that needs to
Yeah,
be.
rapid response. There you go. That was very interesting. I have to honestly say, I never really thought about that until now, because it's always, like I told them, we always put, 3 to 5 years. And then we now have to step back and be like, well, some of these areas of work may need to do something slightly different.
Yes, and it suggests funding and resources, so that if you do develop a rapid response mentality, then does that mean you have one person floating from across different locations? Does that mean someone is kind of like a utility player? Or you have a pot of money that you reserve for external, like consultants, like ninjas, like all of a sudden you need someone who's like an expert in contagious diseases or something. But you just have a general notion that you're going to need some utility players. And so you say to your funders, we're going to need a chunk of money that we're going to just call rapid response. And that might be one way to institutionally get yourself ready for this ongoing marathon of change that never stops.
Yeah, it occurs to me that in this context, with what you all are expressing, there's a distinction almost between being reactive and being responsive.
Right.
It's like it's almost like it's a purposeful strategy on the part of the powers that be to interject these kind of initiatives that throw everybody off guard and change what everyone thinks is the landscape. So it just kind of keeps smaller organizations and community organizations off balance.
Mhm.
And so it's really interesting to hear that how you all are dealing with that in real time, because I think that's actually a very planned strategy on the part of the people that we're trying to influence.
Absolutely.
And I'd say that this again is information for Jane and the leaders of the coalition to lift up these nimble practices that you guys have created real time.
Mhm.
And so I invite you to think about your own nimbleness and put it into chat or send us a separate email at info@civiclab.us. And we'll call that to the attention of the A2J leadership, not just for your cohort, but for the criminal justice cohort as well. So there's things that you guys are doing and your colleagues are doing that deserve to be lifted up and put into these trainings. You all should be, you know what I'm saying? What about the first group? Netza, Nelson, and Rosie, what did you all discuss?
Well, we were discussing the fact that in our strategic planning is to understand the internal needs that we have to satisfy the service that we provide to our clients and based upon the staff that we have, because I mean, we don't have enough time to discuss, but actually we were thinking, obviously, in what we do, we serve the same communities. People who don't have a lot of money, who need legal assistance in immigration, in housing, in domestic violence, family law. And you need attorneys, and the attorneys need to be well paid. Otherwise, they were going to go to a non-profit, they're going to go to law firms. So you don't only need to find an attorney that not only has experience, but has the mission and their heart placed upon in the mission of the organization. So that's the biggest challenge for all of us, to find people who are committed, prepared, and ready to take care of those clients, because otherwise it becomes just like a revolving door. I mean, I was telling Susan, our biggest challenge is to take care of the cases like if they were paying clients. You need to take care of a case like if you were a paying client, not only a client that comes and we fill out a form and push documents in the courts. We don't need that. Our community doesn't need that. There are already a lot of that. So that's what we were going to, but we didn't have time. But that's our biggest challenge.
So one of the things that triggers for me is when you're thinking about the personnel needed to get the job done, and you look at the job market and the flow of people in your market, who else is vying for that same talent? So then it triggers for me the idea that maybe sometimes we have to be about growing the talent pool. So we've actually gone to law schools. The Civic Lab has actually gone to law schools to talk up civic life and public law and try to turn more young lawyers who could be going into criminal law or divorce law or whatever there's a lot of ways to go, and to try to turn on the young lawyers that are in our midst to this social justice work. So that's an opportunity for you, Netza, as a leader. You might become a lecturer at DePaul, or you might hook up with the street law people or other people at the John Marshall, and put that into your Rolodex or into your thinking about, like, all right, once a month I got to check in with the dean of the law school or whatever, and somehow get them to make more lawyers for you. You know what I mean?
Yes, Tom. Especially now, for example, UIC for the first time ever, they have a law degree in UIC.
Yeah.
Hopefully there in the future, in the near future. But it's still the challenge. I mean, Susan, we were talking about, and it's the trends, as we were talking with Emma a little while ago. I mean, the trends of the market, first of all, we have to understand who our market is, who our market profile is, who are we serving, how this market is moving. Like in our community, it's not in the city anymore, it's going to the suburbs. To what suburbs? Now it's going to Susan. Now Susan having already more need than what we are having in the city. Yet we see the big need here in the city with our inner family. So it evolves all the time. And we were talking about we need to strategize short term because the needs are there, the trends are changing, the laws are being changed for example, in immigration, but the funds, as Tom's always mentioned, I always remember what Tom says, what if, because the funds are not going to be there next year. So we need to find a way to strategize to become self-sufficient. That's our challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Is anyone else from your group, Susan or Rosie, anybody else want to jump in?
I'll jump in. I mean, we were all talking about it's a huge problem attracting talent. It is. I mean, right now we're looking for 3 attorneys and I'm like ready to tear my hair out. And I agree. I mean, I in fact, I'm speaking to a law school next week about how awesome it is to be a public interest lawyer. So, I mean, I 110% agree. But the bottom line is that, okay, I'm an executive director. I'm the leader of my organization. A friend of mine who I went to law school with, who's at a large law firm and is the leader of a practice group, literally makes 10 times more than I do. I mean, it's just hard to compete with that. And you really have to decide that, look, I do this out of love. I mean, and everybody who works here does this out of love. But, it's hard. It's really hard. And I sometimes think there has been, the Chicago Bar Association recently did a salary survey, which I'm just delighted about because I want to be able to go to my board and be like, oh my God, look, we're underpaying our people. We need to pay them more. I'm looking for that excuse, quite frankly. And I also want to turn to funders and say, you know what? We need to pay our people more. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Yes. Took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is lifting up partnerships. When you're looking at your strategic plan, especially in an area where things change so quickly, your strategic partnerships can come into play. So, even Netza, you, Susan, you guys are talking about how trends are changing. And I mean, I don't know if you're already partners, but perhaps there may be some areas where you guys can partner together. And
absolutely,
as you strategically play, you can see how that can be a benefit to your organization. I'm just putting it out there.
Right.
But I'm big on partnerships when I'm looking at, looking at the long-term vision of the organization. Who else is in that area that we can connect with to deepen our impact? So partnerships can go a long way as well.
See, our biggest challenge, I will say, we're talking the people who are here participating, Laura, Susan, Rosie, Allison, Jessica, we're here the same, and we do pretty much the same. The biggest challenge we have for our organizations is, as Susan said, we need to pay all of us. We need to pay our staff. If you want, like any business, you want solid clientele coming back, you need to provide good services. You need a great staff. You need attorneys, young attorneys. Yes, they come because, as Tom says, social activity, social mentality, will make them be motivated to be here. But at the end of the day, our challenge continues. And like I mentioned to you, we are rapidly seeing how many new organizations fight for the same funding, and we're learning that people are learning also. People are learning that, why am I going to go to so-and-so if I can do this, if I can get this for free? But then we're creating a little monster, because then people are getting dependent on the service that we have. What if, like Tom says, I always remember that, what is going to happen when there's not going to be funding? Who is going to pay all these people? So I always talk to the politician and say, I mean, I know you're a politician, but there has to be a balance. So our challenge, like I said, is how we are going to become more self-sufficient, more independent. I always say it because we need to provide to more and more clients, and in our field, immigration per se, and the domestic violence is rapidly growing. I mean, after the COVID-19, there's more divorces, as you know, there are more domestic violence, more orders of protection, and I hate it. I mean, my passion is to defend all these ladies who come, but what do we do? And then you need new attorneys, so it's always a circle. So what do? We at the end of the day becomes political. So that's why I said how I'm learning a lot from you guys, because yes, I need to diversify my board. I need to start strategize. I need to resell, but at the same time, internally, we need to know how rapidly our market is changing. Anyway, I'm sorry for.
No, don't apologize. That's perfect. All those things that you're talking about are things that you need to think about. And I think all those issues make it ripe for you to do a strategic plan. I think you are beyond the annual change. There are some other things that you just lifted up in this conversation that you could be looking at for your strategic plan. One of them, key, is your fund development, your diversification of your funding streams. That's
Okay. We're running a little late, but I do want to get this last slide in before the break. So this is good stuff. So let's have the next slide. All right. One element of strategy that we mentioned that I hit on a couple of times is data. That's underneath everything. So I just want to spend a few minutes before we go into break talking about this one key role, this one key element. And the question is, where do you get your data? What do you look at? What are you measuring? And so you could put it into the chat of the kinds of data that your organization tracks on a regular basis in order for it to do its job. So that's one kind of data sets that I'm suggesting that we need to attend to. What sorts of things does your organization track on a regular basis? And then I ask, how do you, as a leader, know what you know? So part of what you know about your organization is from looking at the reports that you're generating, your casework, your time to completion, the outcomes in the court, the age and demographics of the people coming to your front door. All these things are being put in front of you, for sure. But then what else are you looking at? Do you subscribe to any journals? Do you go to any kind of regular association meetings for your space, for your profession? So there's a National Association for Fundraisers, right? That you can belong to regardless of what kind of organization you work at. But then there are groups of caseworkers, obviously, and there are groups of legal practitioners, their associations. What kind of key experts do you have on your Rolodex? So not just your board members, but other key advisors that you have that will take your call. What kind of user testimony do you get? So again, part of the data that you're taking in, is it qualitative? Can you say, well, we sit down with our clients, every quarter in a kind of informal, I don't want to call it a focus group, but how are you getting that raw input from your people, right? Polls and surveys. So, when you deliver a service, before you say goodbye to the client, do you give them the opportunity to rate you? So obviously at the Civic Lab, we do that at the end of every workshop. We ask you to rate us, right? And we say, be brutal. You're not helping us if you're kind. You know, if we screw up, tell us we screw up. If we did a good job, that's also good to know. If we kind of forgot something, that's also good information. So, and you make the feedback process, you know, easy to do, but you lift it up and make it important, so your clients feel like, oh, I'm being listened to. And you never know, good ideas come from all places.
Tom, I love that the last thing you just said there, because the last thing you want to do is create an echo chamber within your own walls, because you're all dealing with the same thing. And so your perspective can kind of mirror each other, and unwittingly, you can be just reinforcing things that are not necessarily true for the people you serve, the people you affect, and the people that maybe you're competing against.
Yeah, and it's easy to do because we're all hardworking, and as you pointed out, we're usually underpaid relative to our talent and our work. So yeah, it's like you don't want to beat yourself up unnecessarily, but it's part of the work, sadly or proudly, to be honest with ourselves, to say, oh, we stumbled, we missed the beat, we got something wrong, as well as the things we get right. And so by having multiple sources of information as a leader that you check on, basically you're a lifelong learner. So now we haven't used that term, but I mean, that is part of our philosophy at the Civic Lab. We are lifelong learners. And as good as you are at what you do, you're never going to stop learning. And the day you say, I know everything, that's the day your organization is going to head to a cliff. So you don't want to be short-sighted and like be, as Phil says, like in an echo chamber where you're only hearing, oh, I love you, I love you, I love you, you're great, you're great. And you don't want to be blindsided because you're not checking in the data, what we call peripheral vision. You don't want to be blindsided because you didn't read cranes. Like, I hate cranes or whatever, you know, I don't have time for cranes. I'm not in that business space. I'm a helping space. But Cranes Chicago is an awesome source of peripheral data on the region's economy, right? All right, so that's all I wanted to say about this now. To be a good strategist, you have to have a kind of a self-learning plan and multiple sources of data, both professionally and personally, that you're regularly checking. That implies a kind of a humble attitude, right? As good as you are, and as seasoned as you are, and as accomplished as you are, as how many plaques you got on the wall, you know, how long you've been in the game, you can still be surprised. You can still learn and grow. That's essential to being a good strategist. Okay, any questions or thoughts before we head into the break? Amma, you can take us home.
All right. Well, this is perfect because we are at 2:40. We have 30 minutes. So we should be able to come back at, what is that, 3:10?